Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. From Eden to eternity, the Bible tells one big story of redemption. My name is Tiffany, and I want to spend a few minutes with you every day walking through the Bible chronologically. Together, we will explore God's sovereign plan as the events of Scripture unfold and point to Jesus. Hey, Year in the Bible friends. Welcome back to the podcast. Tiffany here. And today, we come to a rather popular book in the Old Testament, the book of Esther. Over the next 2 days, we will study this exciting story and continue to see how God's sovereign hand is at work and how he cares for his people, both near and far. In Zechariah, we talked a lot about how Israel has experienced partial restoration throughout history, as well as God's continued protection. Today, we get another glimpse of this partial fulfillment in the book of Esther. The author of Esther is unknown, although there are some who speculate that Mordecai possibly wrote some of it, but there is no internal evidence to prove such. Esther provides us with a picture of the scattered Jewish people under the rule of the Persian Empire. While a remnant of Jews did return to Jerusalem to rebuild, there were many who stayed in the cities where they planted during the 70-year exile. This book displays God's love and protection for his people, whether they are in Jerusalem or scattered among the nations. Esther has two overarching themes we will trace over the next 2 days. First, we will once again see God's sovereignty at work through pagan kings and kingdoms. Interestingly, God's name is never mentioned in the book of Esther, but his fingerprints can be seen as each event unfolds. His plan and purpose will prevail, which leads to the second theme. Wickedness and evil will be defeated. God will fight for his people, as we've seen throughout our journey. Today, we're going to take a look at this narrative by zooming in on 4 of the 5 most prominent people and how God used them. Let's begin with King Ahasuerus. He is also known as Xerxes I. The capital of the Persian Empire during his reign was Susa, which is located in modern-day Iran. Esther's narrative begins by stating that the king held a feast for 180 days. He spared no expense in order to display his wealth and power within the kingdom. The king was arrogant, greedy, and selfish. But God would use him, despite his sinful ways, in order to save and protect the Jewish people. A minor but important figure in this narrative is Queen Vashti. Though she was queen, it was custom in ancient times for the queen to live separately from her husband and only come before him when summoned. But the king summons her as just another beautiful possession of his realm, ready for display. Her refusal to come leads to her banishment and a decree throughout the empire that forces women into submission. This decree was not from the Lord and doesn't display his high view of marriage, displayed through mutual respect and submission. Though Ahasuerus failed in this, God uses Vashti's banishment to bring Esther to the palace. Next, we're introduced to Mordecai. He was taken into captivity during the second siege of Babylon in 597 BC, likely as a very young child. As we read these first 5 chapters, we see that Mordecai was an honorable man who loved Esther as his own. He saved the king from an assassination plot, and he refused to bow down to Haman, the king's right-hand man. But even more than that, he trusted the Lord when Haman's evil plot to destroy the Jewish people was declared. He prayed, fasted, and encouraged Esther in her new role as queen. In chapter 4, verse 14, we read his statement to Esther. "Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Mordecai knew there was a greater plan, and he trusted the Lord. That brings us to Esther, the main figure in this narrative and the person God used to save his people from Haman's evil plot. Because of her beauty, Esther was taken to the palace as one of the many women brought before the king as a candidate for his new queen. The book of Esther isn't explicit about these women's one night with the king, but based on the prevailing cultural norms of the day, we know that she, and those that went before her, left the king's chambers the next morning, no longer a virgin. We often love to think of Esther as an exotic love story, when in actuality it is a selfish, arrogant king taking advantage of his role and women. While a year's worth of spa treatments might sound nice, Esther knew what she was being prepared for, and yet she still found favor with those around her through her beautiful character. Esther's beauty gained her entrance into the palace, but it was her character that shined and led to favor from those around her. Favor from the palace eunuch and favor from the king himself. And it is this favor that enabled her to go before the king without being summoned. God appointed her mission, and she handled the situation with great wisdom by having the Jewish people fast and pray, and then by hosting banquets to reveal the truth. We close today with Haman. Haman was a descendant of King Agag, the Amalekite. The Amalekites had been enemies of Israel since Exodus 17, when Joshua led a group of men to defeat them, while Moses stood on a hill with his arms raised to heaven during the battle. Haman had a deep hatred of God's people, and he used Mordecai's lack of respect and bowing before him as the catalyst to approach the king, appeal to his greed and ego, and have him declare a day when the Jews across the empire would be massacred. The fate of God's people seemingly hung in the balance as Haman's evil plan unfolded. But God wasn't surprised, and he had already set the faithful lives of Esther and Mordecai in motion to display his sovereignty over wickedness. Tomorrow, we will complete this remarkable story filled with God's favor on his people. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you tomorrow, friends. Bye.